Behringer has released some pretty impressive clones of some classic hardware gear. I'm Lenny B, voiceover audio engineer. I'm going to tell you if I think these units might be a good addition to your voiceover studio. Let's make your voice sound better. Now, if you capture your voice onto a microphone, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, you could be a YouTuber, a voice actor, a narrator, a gamer, someone that just does narrations, or you're putting marketing content together for your own material, I can help you improve the quality of your voice recording audio, and that ends up helping you make a better connection with your listeners and your audience. Behringer has released the 1273 Preamp and EQ. It's a clone of a 2-channel 1073 Neve preamp, and they've also released what's called the 369 stereo compressor. It's their clone of the legendary Neve 33609 compressor limiter. Now, I'll let you look up the price difference between the real Neve units and these Behringer clones. There's a huge price difference. Are the Behringer clones close? Do they feel and sound the same? Are they worth it? Are they worth the price? It's not really what this video is about. There are plenty of videos on YouTube on that subject. Now, what I want to teach you in this video is when, how, and why you'd ever want to use units like these for voice recording and production. I recently got this question from Cedric James Jr. 1. He says, I've had this Behringer UV1 unit for about a year now, and I think it's great. My question, though, is for the money, would I be getting a way better quality sound if I bought the Behringer 2-channel 1273 microphone preamp and equalizer and the 369 compressor dual channel strip bundle? So these two units together, he says, I'm sure this will be better, but I'm looking at a price-performance difference. Any comment would be a great help. Well, the answer is yes, there is a difference, and that's why I wanted to walk through these different setups and explain how to use them. Now, if you don't know, the Behringer unit, the UV1, is a channel strip and USB audio interface. The preamp and processing is very similar to the DBX channel strip, which is a classic. It's been around forever, and it's used a lot in broadcast studios, either for podcasts or radio broadcasts. It's kind of a classic unit, and the UV1 is kind of Behringer's clone to the DBX. We'll talk a little bit more about these two units coming up. So I think the best way to help you is to explain what these Behringer units can do and what they're good at doing, and then I'll share with you my preference as an audio engineer of what I think the best way is to go about producing voice recordings. All right, first let's talk about the 1273 2-channel microphone preamp and EQ. Number one, this assumes you've got a good source. Now, the reason why I say that is because a lot of times when we record voiceover from our home studios, we may not be in a perfectly treated room. And when I say a good source, I mean you may be in a room with resonance or reflection sounds. And unless you've got a professionally treated space, your voice may be a less than optimal source. So when it comes to voiceover, this EQ is classic, but it also offers kind of more broad stroke EQ modifications. And unless you've got a good source, often I like to do some surgical corrective EQ, and I would do that first before a more broad sweetening EQ. And if you've taken my EQ training course, you know exactly what I mean. So just understand that this unit would assume that you've got a good source to begin with if you're going to add this EQ while you're recording. Number two, this is a stereo unit, and when we're recording just voiceover, our voices are a mono source, so you really don't need two unless you're recording stereo, which brings us to the third one on my list here. This is really designed for tracking instruments. This original preamp and channel strip with the EQ, the 1073 from Neve, was designed for tracking stereo guitars, maybe two microphones to get a stereo recording of a piano or a stringed instrument like guitar. Maybe you're capturing two guitar cabinets, stereo source. Number four is that it's common to route through this unit. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say you use the preamp, you're not using the EQ, and you record to a track on your DAW, or back in the day, it would have been to a tape machine, right? It would be common to reroute the audio from your recording back through this unit. And you could drive the preamp to add some saturation, or you could drive the EQ or use the EQ and then re-record that processed track on another track. That's one of the common ways to use this, is reroute through a unit like this. And the last thing you should know about this is recall. And let's say you're using this for your voice and you set up the gain, you set up the recording level, you maybe do a little high pass filter or whatever you're doing. If you set it up for one voice and then you wanted to use a different microphone or record another voice, you have to change the settings. Well, you're going to have to make note of what that previous setting was if you want to get back to that same sound. So the idea of recalling settings, it's analog, so you have to keep track of that. Let's talk about the Behringer 369 two-channel rack mount stereo compressor. This also assumes that you've got a good source. If you're using this in series with the 1273, so you've got both of these units, you'd go in the preamp, adding or not adding some of the EQ, and then you would have to go into this afterwards. This is a stereo unit. Again, our voices are mono, so the stereo is not really necessary, and you have to route through using a line level. So you can't plug your microphone directly into this. You need a microphone preamp first. If you were using this for voiceover, it would have to go through the preamp, and then you could run it through this compressor. And that limits the order that you're able to do things, right? You have to have compression after EQ. And then recall, again, is one of the considerations, because with analog gear, if you have one source, you change the settings for another source, you're going to have some type of record of your previous settings. So here are the main things I want you to take away from this, the main concepts when producing and configuring the equipment for voiceover recording. I've got A, B, and C here. These would be three common configurations. A would be using an audio interface like a Focusrite or an SSL or an Audient audio interface, and you would record your microphone going directly into that clean preamp of the audio interface, and then use plugins like the F6 or the Schoeps Omnichannel seen here to do all the processing for you. So you've got a clean source with your audio interface and do the processing in your DAW. Option B would be using a channel strip like the Ultra Voice UV1 by Behringer, where this does several things. It's got a preamp, it has a compressor, a de-esser, an EQ, a gate expander, and an output level. And it's also an audio interface, and this particular unit has a headphone amplifier as well. And option C would be the idea of using these new Behringer units, using the 1273 preamp and EQ going into the 369 compressor limiter. What are the differences? I feel that A would be best for a non-pro treated room. If you've got a resonance or if you've got reflection sounds in your room, I'm going to need to fix those. And the best way to do that would be using surgical modern plugins. My preference to fix any kind of a situation in a room is using plugins either to remove the reverb or EQ out some resonances, which you've seen if you are subscribed to my channel. I talk about those things all the time. Configuration A here offers detailed surgical modifications. It also offers modern and classic sounds. And I was referring to these Behringer clone units are really going after a vibe of older hardware equipment. They're cloning something from years ago, which is a vintage type of vibe. Well, I can get both from plugins like the Schoeps Omnichannel. Configuration A also offers me a variable processing order, and I can do duplicates, right? If I wanted to run the F6 and then go into the Schoeps Omnichannel and then add another F6, I can do duplicates. I could move the processors around. The Schoeps Omnichannel allows me to put the compressor in front of the de-esser or vice versa, or put the preamp in front of the gate and move things all around. Very versatile. Now, plugins, which would be used like in a configuration A, are best used in a post-production situation, meaning non-live. You want to record to a DAW and then add the effects and do the processing afterwards. That's post-production. And configuration A offers precise recall. I could set up this for a particular voice in a particular room using a particular microphone. And then if I wanted to switch and use some kind of a different configuration or change a version or do some type of modification, if I've saved that first setup, I can go back and get that precise sound again. So recall in this situation is a convenience of modern plugins. All right, let's look at configuration B. If you are using something like the Ultra Voice UV1 for your voice, this is best in a real-time processing application, in a pro or non-pro treated recording space. So, this, I think one of the rock stars of these units, like the UV1, is the expander. It can really help reduce room noise in a live situation. So if you are doing live streaming, if you are doing YouTube Live, or you're doing Zoom calls, or you're doing any kind of live broadcasting, units like the UV1 are very common and they do a great job. Now, the exception here would be something like using the Universal Audio Apollo line of audio interfaces that offer real-time software processing. Now, there's also some situations where you can do some real-time software processing on your computer, but one of the drawbacks is it introduces a delay. There's a latency that happens when you use live software processing. And that brings us to configuration C. This setup is going to assume that you've got a pro, well-treated recording space, right? Any of those surgical fixes need to be done first before adding the other broad stroke EQ or sweetening EQ or even compression. I like to do those surgical fixes first, in my opinion, when it comes to voiceover. So you're kind of limited there. These units offer a classic vintage vibe to your sound. The 1073 Neve original preamp was designed in 1970, and the compressor was designed in 1985. And these clones are also going to offer that vintage vibe. It's a sound, it's a vibe, it's a feel that some classic music recordings were made with. The saturation and this EQ from the 1073, and the compression and limiting, the sound, the vibe that it imparts on some full tracks and some master tracks. You've heard these original two units on countless hit records. These are both stereo units, and our voiceovers are mono sources. We're limited by the effect order, which I kind of alluded to. You can't go into the compressor unless you've got a preamp. You can't put your microphone directly into this compressor, so you have to go through the preamp first if you were to have these two units. So you're limited by the processing order. You can't EQ after the compressor unless you reroute back into the unit, which is just going to add some time, which is the last thing on my list. If you're doing any kind of routing, time becomes a factor if you are producing a project, if you are auditioning for voiceover, even if you're just putting out YouTube videos wherever. We try to reduce the amount of production steps so we can increase our output while retaining whatever quality. And, if you're going to have to reroute through these units, you're just adding another step. So you have to add that into the equation. And I'll make a little note here. I don't often use hardware and plug-in processing together. For me, I like to use either one or the other, depending upon what I'm doing. Now, as an audio engineer, I have many different ways that I can help you improve your audio quality. I have training courses on things like acoustic treatment, recording levels, workflow, EQ processing, and more. And if you're just getting started, I have a free voice recording basics training that will give you a good general understanding of the audio engineering side of voice recording. It's made for beginners and it's free. I'll have the link in the description of this video. Now, you may have heard of my custom processing preset service. That's where I design the plugin processing for you, custom to your voice, your mic, in your room to get you the best possible sound. So I do this for beginners, and I do this for top tier level voice actors, podcasters, and YouTubers. If you want to send me your audio to get a free demo of your custom processed sound, first go to my website, lennyb.com. Then on the homepage, you're going to see a red button at the top of the page. Click that and follow the 3 easy steps. Step 1, prepare your audio file according to the list of instructions. And these are pretty easy to follow, just things like how long I need the file and in what format. Step 2, fill out the form. Now, this is so I can get your contact information and an idea of the equipment that you're using and your sound goals. Then, step 3, you're going to get an email from me with an upload link for your audio file, and that's it. Then you're going to receive a message from me with the audio files to listen to. One file is going to be the original unprocessed file that you sent, and the other is going to be the processed version, level matched so you can compare the two at the same loudness. Well, I hope that gives you a little better understanding of the difference between plug-in versus hardware processing for voice. If you want to learn a little more about a couple of the units that I mentioned in this video, I have walkthrough videos for voiceover on the Behringer UV1. You could watch that here. And the DBX286S, you could watch that one here. That's one of my most popular videos. These are two great units if you need real-time live processing for your voice. I'm Lenny B, audio engineer. Thanks for watching.